Good evening. My name is Joe Sam Robinson. It's my pleasure to have us with us tonight, Mr. Harry Gross. Welcome, Harry. Harry is a man of great insight. I hasten to say occasionally. But okay.
High praise, sir.
Yeah,
high
that's
praise indeed.
Thank you. Well, there are lots of things to talk about, and one thing that's, I think, fairly interesting is something called the news cycle. What that means is that seemingly the mass media and in general attention of society is episodically directed toward one firestorm on the horizon, and the attention is focused there until something else happens. And then all the attention that was formerly there is sort of forgotten, and thus the outcomes are obscured by new crises. And I mean, we can think about just some of the things that have happened recently about where society's attention was being directed, and I can name a number of them. Well, we don't talk about the war in the Ukraine anymore. So that's all the publicity that took place in that. All this is sort of a cataclysmic turn of events. It's going to have a world dynamic shape. What should we do about it? Thousands of people are dying. The European community is beside itself. The Russian bear is growling. What does all this mean? Well, no one can say exactly right now. And who's winning the war and what's up and what are the details? Totally obscure. We can also see that in Venezuela. We had this big story about the U.S. takes out the Maduro, the president. They're in jail now. Very little attention to that. And we can think about the Epstein files, whatever that is. That's certainly not very little discussion about what's going on with that. And particularly, we can think about tariffs. So this is a world dynamic event. I think, let's see, on Liberation Day, was that in April? Was that April? When was that? It was
April last year.
April last year, about a year ago. And so what actually happened with that? What was the outcome of it? It looks like the courts put it aside, and there was a question about what's going to happen, and it looks like $100 billion is being paid back out of the federal treasury. Apparently it's been turned away, I think, but nobody can actually say what is transpiring. And we now have the present circumstance where I guess the attention is focused on the war against Iran and what's happening with that. And so the question to ask is, firstly, is this a healthy situation, and how can the public be so easily manipulated? And does that have, if we depend on the media to direct societal attention in a particular way, one way or the other, either on the red side or the blue side, and we depend on that, and elections come along, and if we're not I guess, aware of the impact of mass media. This certainly, the cause of the day du jour, cause du jour, the way the news cycle is functioning, has an impact on democracy and the ability to manipulate society. Or do you have any comments on this?
I mean, I don't think it's a healthy scenario, situation, however you want to describe it, because one, from a civic perspective, right, from a political perspective, democracy depends on an educated electorate, right? An electorate that is capable of making informed decisions about itself and its future. And that requires a healthy media environment. More than that, it requires a common reality, right? If everyone's operating under a shared reality and a sense of objective truth, of shared facts, you can have reasonable disagreements and still work together. The current news cycle, mass media itself has caused deviations in that shared reality, but the current news cycle has now kind of shifted into, it is no longer profitable to create an informed electorate. It is profitable to get engagement, And so you focus on stories that people want to engage with. So that means whatever's the most urgent in terms of global affairs. So right now it's the Iran war. A month ago it was talk of tariffs, then a month before that it might have been Ukraine, then a month before that it was Gaza. I mean, you can pick the issue of the day because they want what gets the most clicks. It's not even just on like what's on TV, it's what's online, it's what's on social media, what gets the most engagement. So stories that are urgent, stories that make you angry, stories that make you feel happy and go, oh, look at that cute little dog or that cute little cat or whatever. That's what sells. And in some ways, we've kind of created a media environment that feeds on dopamine addiction, right? That whatever gives our brain the most kind of dopamine or the most excitement is what we tend to engage with. And then what we engage with is what the news cycle wants to focus on. And once we get bored of that, once we no longer get the same amount of dopamine, right, from engaging with something, then we want to move on, right?
Those are germane thoughts, Harry. One of the things that strikes me is rationality and how possible it is to have that exist. So I think there can be, I've discussed neural structure enough, but there can be moments that a lot of emotional drafts are suspended and people can have rational interchanges on one subject or another. And try and get to some kind of common truth. Well, I think that's somewhat unusual, and the predispositions are often against that. And people that want to manipulate other people are quite good at it. And if you look at people selling toothpaste, shall we say, there's not much difference between selling toothpaste and persuading someone that I don't know, a particular ethnic group is evil. There's it's really the same kind of skills involved in that. And when people assess information, I think in general, the filters for the stimulus they receive, they require some kind of earlier education or training to understand facts, understand how facts can be twisted. And I think one can look at Goebbels, who he was, just to tell it, people in the audience, he was the German propaganda minister, and he was a genius, I think we could say. An evil genius about how he could manipulate people. And so when the Nazis did their propaganda, they just kept repeating a simple fact over and over again. And you can see that in the political realm, or in maybe if people are trying to, let's say, attract an audience for a kidnapping or some kind of heinous crime or whatever. Where is the missing kidnap victim? Where's the missing kidnap victim? And just keep going at that. And so people get, what's any news? I'm just hearing this every minute on television, whatever. And the other thing Goebbels did is he interspaced boring facts with fun things, ice skating or little dogs that, the dachshunds that could run the fastest dachshund in the Reich or whatever they try and do. And so it's not all just boring stuff. And people are just led by this. And the media seems to be good at it. And they're so good at it that it causes questions about how well that comports with a requirement of the democratic system that we have an informed, restrained electorate. And I see no signs of that happening. And it's not the right or the left, it's the way people are and their dependence on media and facts. And they rarely probe those facts. And then finally, one can say that obtaining the facts is often quite difficult. We can look at the war in the Middle East. What exactly are the facts? What are the facts? And a lot of the facts are filtered through the government on either side. Or we could say certainly the Democrats may present some facts. I mean, I don't know, about ICE, some kind of facts. These are our facts, say the Democrats. Well, are we sure? Is every single fact correctly stated? And you'd have to imagine they're not. It's the cause of the day, but there could be encumbrances or over the line of rationality in the dialogue. And can people know that? Can they trust what's being said to them? And I think it's particularly true right now in the war in the Middle East, where we're getting facts of different types, but particularly from the government, nuclear weapons, and we'll talk about that maybe at another sitting. But it does appear that we have a dependency on the establishment that produces these things. And finally, this is our present circumstances. I don't think really it's the first time this has happened. If we go back to the Spanish-American War, William Randolph Hearst, well, basically with his yellow journalism, basically he believed that he caused the war. He was pushing so hard in his newspapers that the politicians fell in line and, oh, sure, let's have a little war here. And you can wonder, is something like that going on now? All right, I'll toss the football to you, Harry.
I mean, there is certainly no end to media manipulation, I mean, on all sides, because media shapes the way we understand the world, and the way we understand the world shapes our actions, right? If we perceive the world to be a certain way, we act accordingly. The real, I think, tragedy we're seeing, one of the ways we've gotten here has been, in many ways, the death of kind of old school, hardcore field journalism. One of the reasons we have very little idea of what's going on in the Middle East has been the cuts across multiple news networks and programs where there are very few foreign correspondents left, particularly in the Middle East. Many have been killed in the past few years. In the Gaza war, for example, it's the deadliest conflict for journalists in human history. We have over 270 journalists and media workers who've been killed in the last 3 years. Hundreds wounded, more arrested, and that's kind of had a chilling effect on field reporting, particularly combat reporting. And it's made it difficult to figure out, okay, what's happening, right? Many of the people who would have been covering Iran, for example, are dead or injured.
Yes.
Because of what's going on in Gaza and Lebanon. So there's a number of kind of multiple factors that are kind of coalescing into a trend of less hardcore, like, let's go find the facts, let's go verify the stories that we're being given, right? You ask the question, can we trust what a government organization says? That's the role for independent media. And one of the great geniuses of liberal democracy has been creating a space for independent media through the freedom of the press to fact check the government, right? To let people know when they're being lied to, when they're being sold a bill of goods. And you see that, authoritarian regimes of all stripes, right, from the Soviet Union to the Third Reich, one of their first tactics is to establish control of the media in some way, shape, or form, either through great censorship, through state control, whatever it is, but to take control of that media environment. And we have seen the American media environment become less and less free over the past decades. Not just from, I'm not talking about some kind of sinister government takeover, censorship. I'm talking about just in terms of economics. We used to have dozens of major news networks, and in addition to the three major legacy groups of CBS, NBC, and ABC, we had small town journalism. We had local newspapers, right, everywhere. There were multiple sources to provide information that was well researched. My church this past weekend opened up a time capsule from our parish house that was established a century ago. And in that article, in that time capsule was a newspaper article from the Macon Telegraph in 1926 that had firsthand reporting on Mussolini's condition after an illness at the time, because the Macon Telegraph had a foreign correspondent in 1926, right? And we don't have that anymore. And that's not because of the government censorship. That's because the economics of journalism has changed. There have been so many mergers of major media conglomerates now. You've had local papers that can't afford to keep their doors open for various reasons and have had to close. So there has been, there is a lesser quality journalism, I would say, that's taking place now than there was, a few decades ago, just because the economics of journalism and the media has been hostile to independent media.
There are a lot of facts that are going on now, and one of them, I think, is on the right and the left in regards to media. And so the word legacy media is just touted about quite a bit. And the idea is that, and I think this would be an opinion that is easily extracted from people on the right, is the legacy media is basically manipulating the country. And they pick their stories, they stay with it. In fact, there are examples of that, maybe talking points, and there might be one talking point, and it's rather interesting to see this. Maybe if you watch Fox, not a bad thing to occasionally do, just like watching whatever, I don't know, what's a good leftist network? I'll have to think of one.
It used to be MSNBC, now it's, what is it, NBC Now? Yeah.
Well, nevertheless, the idea is they say, here's what's just been said. Here are 10 people that use exactly the same word. And the idea, beneath the surface, the story is, there are people out there that are part of some kind of sinister conspiracy in the media, and they get a letter from some person. This is what we're going to talk about today. And they're aligned with the Democratic Party. Today, we're going to talk about whatever it is, forest fires that are ruining the environment because we have climate change or something like that. Mm-hmm. All right. Forest fires are killing, 1, 2, 3, 6 every day. These issues are brought up.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned the absence of foreign correspondence. So it may be on each side they have to depend on one sort of, knowledgeable institution that's going to provide them with their talking points. And maybe that's the New York Times. Maybe it is. So if you look at what stories are on the front page of Washington Post, connected to the Northeast, not eschewing provincial thoughts or ideas. And that's, I think, one of the tensions in the country right now. If you live in a more provincial place, I'll pick Macon, Georgia for that, they have their own sort of things that interest them, or their own sort of connections with the past that are different than if you're in a real urban area, such as New York City, where an enormous percentage of people were born overseas. There's a lot of, walking around on Fifth Avenue, hearing English spoken is 50% of the time, probably. That's my opinion. So people from everywhere, very diverse opinions. Economic issues are quite different. The traditional mores have lapsed, one could say. And out of that cauldron comes the words that are in the New York Times, and they're put out there. That would be the view on the right. Now, on the right side of things, maybe there are opinions that are being put out there, maybe from President Trump somewhat, or from the administration, maybe. And these are going to be our talking points. And so particularly in the war, I don't know, Iran is destroyed, something like that. We hear that. We hear different American progress is touted, which is an easy sell, isn't it? If you tout American virtue. So that's some of what's going on, and I consider that not healthy. And one has to wonder, what about some independent inquiry on whatever's up? The Christian Science Monitor, I think, was good at it in its day. And the C-SPAN, I think, is good. They're excellent, really quite good. But there are not too many efforts to do that. And let's ask the question about the war in Iran. I mean, what actually are the facts? What actually is going on? what are the facts on that? Is this policy the government is pursuing, is that likely to be successful? Is it how did we get here? Where are we going? And pretty much on the right, we hear a staccato kind of thing. Well, everything is great or whatever, and people sort of listen to the president and then amplify his words. Any comments on that duality?
Well, I think that again, I want to return back to the economics of media has made this problem, right? Yeah, let's say that there is a bias in something like the New York Times, which there is, right?
Naturally.
I mean, not just
The
in
word
terms
is naturally.
of yeah,
Of
naturally.
course.
I mean, an easy example, and you can see this across multiple American media, is the treatment of Israel, for example, and police. There's a famous passive voice in anything involving Israel or the police, where Palestinians die; they're never killed. An officer involved shooting is never an extrajudicial murder. That kind of thing, right? You change words and use tenses. That's a bias. And the way you used to deal with that is you had multiple avenues of inquiry, right? You had the New York Times that say one thing, the Wall Street Journal might say a different version. Then you had your local paper that might have a totally different idea. And then you had the radio broadcast that might, Walter Cronkite might tell you something totally different.
Correct.
And if you consumed all of that, you got something approximating an objective truth, because you had 4 different versions of a story. And where they overlapped, you could say, okay, this is the commonalities of a story. This is probably what happened. Now, we live in an environment with fewer media outlets and where people consume much more tribally, in the sense that there's an argument that one of the last kind of ways that Americans have agency politically in their environment, given that how many things are kind of done out of our hands, is in what we consume. And so we've politicized consumerism to the point where if you are a liberal, you don't read the New York Times. You don't watch Fox News. You stay in your lane. You sit with your people. And vice versa. On the right, you don't read the New York Times. You just watch Fox News, right? How dare you listen to CNN, that kind of thing.
Right.
And that's created echo chambers where we've lost a shared sense of reality, objectively. And it's enabled a new form of independent media that's not healthy, that is organized primarily around what I would call grifting. You have particularly, podcasters, bloggers who pass themselves off as, I'm the voice of reason that the legacy media won't tell you, on both the left and the right.
Yes.
And say that they're objective, truth tellers, when in reality they're just a guy or a woman with a microphone and a keyboard.
Yes.
And they're not, they're as reliant on anything else as, on what people tell them as we all are. But because people consume media in different ways too, that it's harder to police that objectively, right? When we had radio as the main form of kind of newscasting, there was a formula. There were certain channels, and you tuned in at X time, and if you missed that broadcast, well, you missed it, kind of thing. Now, if I want to know what's happening, let's say I want to know what happened on Wednesday of last week. I can go to my phone, I can go to Spotify, go to I can pick any news podcast I want to. Let's say I want to go to The Economist. I'll click their Wednesday morning briefing, and I can listen to what happened and their coverage last week, right?
Yes.
That's great from an archival point of view, but it means I get to pick and choose what I listen to when I listen to it. That's convenient, but it also means that I no longer exist in that shared reality with people who listen to that live. And this atomization and tribalism of media has traded convenience for objectivity, where we don't have to go outside of our lane. We don't have to listen to people we don't like. We don't have to. We can choose what we listen to, who says it, and when they tell it to us. And that's creating a further dysfunctional environment.
Well, it's very distressing. I mean, naturally, it's distressing to hear opinions that don't match yours. Mm-hmm. So it causes all kinds of anger, dis-ease, unhappiness. Yeah. So if you're forced, I don't know, whatever your viewpoint is, maybe, I don't know, the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, and if you say, well, this is what happened in Gaza, and it's actually not, this is fine. I mean, it's good that this happened because these bad people were killed. Well, it's great. We should do more of it, or whatever. That's your maybe you're a Palestinian guy, and that you have to listen to this, and your family's been killed or whatever. So it's very, very tough on you to sit there and listen to that. And the same in any normal human just doesn't like that. It's a burdensome thing to listen to another opinion. And you could ask the question, are people educated to do that? Probably they're not. I mean, in other words, if you, one of the things about a liberal education that should happen, it shouldn't merely be you're a specialist in one subject or another. You know how to, I don't know, whatever, look at the stars. Well, that's what you're good at that. But you're so intensely involved with that getting in your educational process, you weren't trained to listen to the other side. Particularly, an issue that you touched upon is the subtle sophistry, how people can be suborned by listening to the same facts. So hear the way that the facts are presented on one side, and the words are carefully constructed. The way the facts are handled and pushed around, it's quite an art form, and people need to recognize it. I think it would be a very good thing in our educational system, maybe at a slightly higher level, but past grammar school. But taking a newspaper article, whatever it is, or maybe two different, the same event, two different viewpoints, and there's presented A and presented B, and see what the tricks are to put their side's story to make it appear this event favors their side, and the words are subtly put in there. The other thing that happens is a good Goebbels, going back to the Nazi propaganda thing, is to only talk about events that are match your side, and to be very extreme about them. I mean, and picked examples. I mean, you could say, well, I'm against a porous border, which is a very, in my opinion, a very valid kind of story that would be reasonable to have that opinion. And then the way that might be presented would be axe murder was illegal immigrant, something.
Yeah.
And there are 3 million axe murderers out there, and the percentage of axe murderers that are legal immigrants might be on the small side. Yeah. But you wouldn't hear that. And so that's, I think an issue that needs to be corrected.
No, absolutely. I mean, with Laken Riley's murder, for example, a couple of years ago in Athens, that's how it was politicized very quickly. Is because her murderer was an undocumented immigrant, that this is, violent undocumented immigrants coming around. When in reality, it wasn't an undocumented immigrant murdering an American citizen. It was a femicide. It was a man who had stalked her for months and picked her and killed her. Well, yeah. And instead of framing it as this is violence against women, it was look at this poor white woman who's been murdered by an undocumented immigrant.
The facts the facts can be manipulated and are, and so just understanding that is a big deal. The art of propaganda is an old one, and I think it's a religious word coming out of the Catholic Church, I believe. But it's certainly something the country needs to be aware of, and as they try and understand the facts of what's happening, particularly in our next electoral cycle, it's something that needs to happen. All right, I'll give you the last word on the subject here.
All right, I think that this is a subject that we really do need to be talking about more as a country. We don't think about it, I think, as often as we should, because we're consumers. We are just, we have more options to consume media. This is great. I can listen to whoever I want, whenever I want. And I think we need to stop and think more about the consequences of that environment. Are we still living in a shared reality or not? Because if that answer is ever no, then our democratic system is going to begin to crack up.
Yes. Well, we have to try and protect our societal values in difficult times. Well, on that note, Harry, thank you. We'll
thank you for having me.
Some more. Thanks,
of course.
Once again, thank you.